Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I am your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we will be giving you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state, from everything from how to plant, when to prune and fertilize everything from vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. On today's show, we'll be talking with guest LaRene Bautner of Millcreek Gardens, and I'm so excited to tell you more about her in just a minute. We will be giving you all the inspiration you need to start seeds indoors. The planting bug hits you this time of year, doesn't it? We're excited for spring, and what do we do to get a sense of the upcoming warmer weather and growing season? We start some seeds. So we'll get into all of that with LaRene. And we'll also learn some fascinating information about Millcreek Gardens. I was there recently for a visit and learned some really inspiring things that I cannot wait to share with you. But first, let's get into the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is learn your frost dates. Now, what do I mean by frost dates? Frost dates are the average last spring frost and suggested vegetable planting dates for your location in Utah. And as I'm sure you can imagine, they vary tremendously depending on the city you live in. For example, Moab's last frost date is April 18th, where Woodruff's is June 26th. So it really makes a lot of sense to find out exactly what the average frost date for your city is. And I will have a link in our episode notes on where you can find a perfect guide by city that gives you the average last frost date. And that will be up, that will be sending you to usu.edu's website. So we'll put that in our episode notes. But really, pretty soon, we're all going to be seeing vegetables and annual flowers and other plants in all the garden centers. And yet up until around Mother's Day, at least in, Salt Lake City in May, it can still freeze. So we don't want to waste our time and money buying and planting plants that will be impacted by the frost. And so make sure that the plant you're buying around that second week in May, assuming you live in Salt Lake City, can handle a freeze. For example, I grew up in Murray, and my grandfather would always say, around Mother's Day weekend, it's time to put the garden in, and you plant on Mother's Day because your tomatoes need to be knee-high by the 4th of July. I always remember that, and to be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever had my tomatoes knee-high by 4th of July, so one of these times I'll get everything in the garden in time and be able to hit my grandpa's standards. But in fact, that being said, he would also have zucchinis in the garden by then, so hopefully I'll hit that goal this year. But in Murray and in, a lot of the areas around Salt Lake City, you'll see these vegetables and annual flowers in the garden centers, and it's just in many cases too early to plant. Now, that being said, if you're an expert gardener and you know exactly what you're doing, you know the difference between, what can and can't be impacted by a frost. For example, if you've got wall of waters and you can get those in the ground and cover your tomatoes with those, then great. But really, it just, as a general average gardener, it really makes sense to learn those frost dates. And as a matter of fact, there's also a great link and information on USU's website that talks about the hardy vegetables, the semi-hardy vegetables, and the tender annuals. And what those really go into is what plants you can start before the frost, and what vegetables can handle a little bit of cold, and what really need to wait until after the first frost. And that was the tip of the week.
Never miss a tip for your garden, and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
On today's show, we'll be talking with our guest, LaRene Bautner of Millcreek Gardens, where every day is a great day. And let me tell you, this woman is one of the most engaging people I have ever spoken with. I'm not kidding you. When I was able to speak with her recently at Millcreek Gardens, it was such a unique experience, and I almost felt like I was talking to the mistress of gardening in Utah. It was just so incredible to have her walk me around the nursery and see all the just amazing things that Millcreek Garden has. And there's just so much more than plants there, and I don't really know how to describe it, but it's it has a truly magical feeling when you're there. And just walking around the garden center with her, every little section of that place has this incredible history. And even meeting with her in her office, she was talking about how her office was actually the living room of the home that she grew up in. And here she is so many years later running this incredible business on that property. And she's just a phenomenal person. I'm sure you've heard of her before. You're going to recognize her voice so much because you've probably heard her radio commercials from the past. You've seen her on television. She does a segment on ABC Utah on Thursdays, and she's just a phenomenal person. And one of the things that really blows me away with her is she'll talk to you a little bit about her mission, which is connecting people to plants. And she truly embodies that. It's so unbelievable just to watch her engage with someone who doesn't even know much about gardening or plants, and she'll just suck them right in and really teach them so much. And it's just inspiring. So I can't wait to talk with her on this episode and really give you guys the story of Millcreek Gardens. So I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the gardening related events coming up in Utah. And if you have an event that you know of that you want us to talk to our listeners about, let us know. You can send us a message on Instagram at Gardening Utah, and we would love to give your event a little shout out. But here's some of the events coming up in Utah pretty soon that you can participate in. So on March 21st, Saturday, March 21st at 10 a.m. at Basil and Rose in Bountiful, Utah, there is a class on growing a healthy lawn organically. On Wednesday, March 25th, there is at the Hunter Library in West Valley City, and I'm particularly interested in this event. It's called Coops de Ville, How to Raise Backyard Chickens. Now, I'm going to eventually do an episode on this because I've got chickens at my house. I absolutely love having backyard chickens, and I'm going to debunk a lot of myths about chickens in a future episode. But Hunter Library, Wednesday the 25th at 7 p.m. in West Valley City, How to Raise Backyard Chickens. At Sun River Gardens in Orem, which is absolutely gorgeous if you've never been there, on Saturday, April 11th at 10 a.m., they have a Vegetable Gardening 101 class, and that's a perfect time of year to get started planning and working on your garden. At the USU Botanical Center, there is a walk and talk class series on raised bed gardening, and that's on Wednesday, April 8th at 6:30 p.m. If you're in Woods Cross, there is a gardening series spring class. They're going to talk about controlling pests organically, and that's on Tuesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. at Woods Cross High School. On Saturday, March 28th, there is a Pollinator Gardening 101 class at Tri-City Nursery in Kaysville, another amazing nursery here in the great state of Utah. Pollinator Gardening 101, Saturday, March 28th at 9 a.m. That will be a really fun class, and there's going to be some really beautiful flowers, I'm sure. Up next, after this break, we are going to finally get to talk to LaRene, and we have the most fun conversation about connecting people to plants. Stay tuned.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and I have our very first guest with me here in studio. We're going to be giving you all kinds of tips and tricks for spring planting, and we're going to learn all about her and her amazing garden center. With me is LaRene Bautner of Millcreek Gardens.
Hey, good morning. Just remember, every day is a great day at Millcreek Gardens.
That's right. Thank you so much for being our first guest on Gardening Utah.
My pleasure.
I mean, I recently paid a visit to Millcreek Gardens, and in fact, I've bought plants there for years and years.
Thank you.
So I recently was at Millcreek Gardens, where every day is a great day, of course. And I was able to talk to you while I was there, and I learned so many fascinating things that I really wanted to share with our listeners. And you told me about your mission while I was there, and I loved it so much. And you said, your mission is connecting people to plants. And I loved that. So talk to me about your mission.
Well, part of the mission statement of my life personally as LaRene Bautner is to connect people and plants and do it in the funnest way possible. So remember when I showed you those primroses, those yellow primroses, and I said, okay, what do these smell like? And you're like, oh, I'm not sure. And I say, how about Fruit Loops? And you went, oh, Fruit Loops, that's it. And so that's just one of those things. Now, I have a group of herbs here this morning. There's little cuttings of herbs, and
I love these.
There's this is going to be the chocolate mint, and you smell that, and you just go, oh, that is just has so much energy to it. You can float it in a drink. You can cut it up in salad, and a wonderful plant that is the easiest thing to grow, and it is extremely healthy for us. It gives us energy and vitamins that it's a super high energy plant.
Oh, I love mint. And this variety I do not have. So you said chocolate mint, correct?
Yes.
This smells phenomenal. I know that you can't smell it out there, but trust me, go to Millcreek Gardens and smell the chocolate mint. This is incredible. I have to get some.
Well, it's a great plant, and it's also really easy to grow, and it's great for children and families.
Well, it is, and it is very easy to grow, and especially in containers as well.
Well, you'll probably want to keep it in a container, and even if you want to bury it in the ground, put it in a container because it does spread.
Yes,
like no other.
It really can take over quickly. I've noticed one of the things that I love to do with mint, especially when I have too much of it, I like to cut it up, of course, wash it well, but then I put it in ice cubes. And freeze it, and it's so fun to just have have some mint ready to go for a drink. It's fun.
Well, we have tons of different types of mints here. In the next couple of months, there'll be many coming in. We're going to have the mojito mint, orange mint, apple mint, and probably 20 others. So
orange mint.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh, I can't wait. I'm gonna have to come up.
Grapefruit mint, lime mint.
Oh my word. That's amazing. I've really got to up my mint game. So I will be by to pick up some mint for sure. Some different varieties. I just love it. What else?
So when I think of connecting people and plants and doing it in a really fun way, sometimes people come into the Millcreek Gardens and they'll say, gee, I really need some help in this particular area. Maybe it's a mailbox garden or something at my front entry or something to hide my foundation, maybe something to round off a corner. And we start sharing these different textures and colors and different features of the plant, maybe the size and shape, and maybe even some fragrance to them, like the Daphnes, the flowering shrubs. They're Daphnes, and they actually are an evergreen. There's eternal fragrance Daphne that blooms all season long, and it smells very fragrant, almost like a gardenia.
I didn't realize that Daphne would bloom all year long.
Well, not all of them do, but eternal fragrance does. Summer ice does. And we don't have them all year long, but we have them as much of the year as they're available as we can get them. We happen to have some right now. It's exciting.
Isn't it? I've got to come get some because isn't it interesting because when you mentioned Daphne, and we're talking here about connecting people to plants, when you mentioned Daphne, it took me right back to my grandmother's backyard.
Isn't that the most amazing thing? I also love it when people say, I'm going to plant a lilac, or I need a peony or a peony. Oh. And they say, how do you say it? Well, I say it peony. How do you say it? Well, I say it peony. Well, then let me show you the peonies, or clematis versus clematis.
Oh, wow.
I just mirror what people say because different parts of the country, they're pronouncing these plants in different ways. And then some people say, well, there are so many different names to this particular plant. How do you know how to say what? And I just mirror what people say. And it's amazing that there are so many connections of people and plants. And the other day there was this guest that came in, he and his wife, and they were at the checkout area. And our new general manager, John Rader, was in there, and he says, how are you doing? What are you doing? And he needed to get a particular soil. And John was showing him, and he says, what are you doing? And he says, I'm breeding Haworthias, which is a succulent tropical plant. He goes, oh, really? He says, oh, I know a lot about succulents. And by the time the conversation was over, they had connected this guest and his wife to a specialist Haworthia grower in San Diego that John knows, and traded hundreds of pictures. And he sent a picture of his greenhouse. And I don't know where he even lives in Salt Lake. But So here's a little story of somebody just saying hi. And then they connect people in the world of some little specialty plant. And you can do it with clematis, you can do it with Japanese maples, you can do it with herbs, you can do it with medicinal plants. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I have goosebumps right now telling you about it, because when you come to Millcreek Gardens, we are there to connect people and plants and do it in a fun way. And it's your favorite garden center since 1955. My parents moved on the property in the late year of the year 1955. It's our 65th anniversary. And it was very humble circumstances at the time.
Yeah.
And they had a couple of children, and they had actually shipped a few plants from the Northwest from my uncle's nursery in Troutdale, Oregon.
Oh, wow.
And they were containerized, and they were at my grandpa's property, his farm, in Murray. So the plants, actually for Millcreek Gardens, the first plants were delivered to Murray, and then my dad was able to deliver them back over to Millcreek Gardens when they finally moved in the house and fix things up. And there was a dilapidated greenhouse right adjacent to the house, and he found some baling wire and some wood on the property, and he went and bought some plastic and covered it and turned the furnace on and immediately began making juniper, forsythia, and lilac and pyracantha cuttings.
Oh, my word.
And my mother and father were both graduates of Utah State. My dad has a degree in landscape architecture from there, and he learned plant propagation, and so he's able to do that. And that's the humble beginnings of Millcreek Gardens. Now, currently, right now at Millcreek Gardens, we start plants with these. Now, what does this look like to you?
Oh, interesting. It looks a little cardboardy, like maybe
it's a little plug.
Okay.
It's about an inch across, an inch deep, and then here's these are from cuttings. So they take a piece of the plant and they'll stick it in the soil, usually using some rooting hormone, and then they put these in and they grow out, and then we put these in this plant. Now this is a columbine that we started with, and then here's the growing one that's starting to bloom now that we have. So.
Oh, interesting. So we're going to take some pictures of these and we'll put these up on our Instagram so that everybody listening can enjoy and have a look at it. And you can find that at Gardening Utah on Instagram. But this is so interesting. So the plant that you just set down, what one is that?
This one here is called sweet woodruff.
Sweet woodruff.
It's actually a native plant here. It grows in the Rocky Mountains, and it's a ground cover, and we usually recommend it for less than half a day of sun. And it grows really well under high filtered sun, and it grows well with plants like ajuga. This one happens to be a tricolor bronzes ajuga, which
has a beautiful
the pink color to it. This is its winter color. And then this is a sedum, which is a succulent, and it's super red.
Yes.
It's dragon's blood sedum.
That's a beautiful
Here's
one.
another sedum. This is the Sun Sparkler series of sedum, which there's 7 types, and they grow about 10 inches tall, and they're great for like a park strip, a dry corner. They're going to bloom in the fall, usually pink tones to those colors of blooms. And they are a wonderful, beautiful plant with different colors. Like one's variegated green and gold. One is called Wildfire, and it has reddish, orangish, goldish tones to the foliage. And it looks just like this, except it has all those colors to it.
And it gets a little bit of a different color in the fall, correct?
The winter colors are wonderful. I wish I would have brought Angelina sedum. Angelina sedum is a chartreuse green in the summer, and it goes orange in the winter.
Oh, my word.
Through the season, it changes as the sugars change in the leaves, and the temperatures change. They change color.
Amazing.
Just like a maple.
Yes. Now, the sweet woodruff you have there, sweet woodruff makes some little white flowers, does it not?
Yes, it does. It grows about 10 inches tall.
Yes. Yeah, those are fantastic. And so the larger columbine that you have here, that started out from a smaller...
From a plug like this.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. And tell us a little bit about some of the other plants that you've brought in studio today. And again, we'll take some of these photos and put them on our Instagram at Gardening Utah.
Yes. This one here is a very much loved plant, but not many people know what it is. It's growing at Temple Square. It's growing in some gardens like at the Capitol.
Wow.
And around town, a lot of places. And it's a winter bloomer, and it's called hellebore.
Hellebore.
And it's also called Lenten rose.
Oh, interesting. It does kind of have a rose and a little bit of a ranunculus look to it.
Sure, and I think that it has some medicinal properties.
Really?
So if you think of Lent and Lenten rose, it has some historical value back to Christ's time.
Oh,
and
my
when
word.
he was crucified, this was probably one of the plants that they used. So,
wow.
Hellebore Christmas rose.
That is an absolutely beautiful plant.
So if you read about it, that's what you'll learn. And there's many, many colors. There's like green flower, there's pink ones, there's white ones, there's spotted ones. And it's an evergreen. The foliage actually stays through the winter. The first time I ever saw this plant, I was at my father-in-law's home, which is near 33rd South and about 150 West. And he went out, and it was snowing lightly, and he went out and he lifted up this garbage can lid, and this plant was blooming underneath this garbage. And I said, I've never seen that plant. It was probably February. And I said, what is this? And he goes, it's a Lenten rose. It's a Christmas rose. That's another name for it also. And I said, I don't know what it is. And that's my introduction to that. It was probably 25 years ago.
Unbelievable.
So it's really fun, as we talked earlier about plants and who they remind us of. It's like my father-in-law is sitting here right with me right now because
Wow.
I never knew about this, and I know a lot about perennials.
Yes.
I've studied them for years, and I know all the new ones coming out, and if you can stump me on a perennial, that's pretty good. And so this is really amazing. Now, this next one is creeping phlox.
Oh, I
And it's an
love that.
early season bloomer, and this one here happens to be one with a really bright eye, which is the center of the flower.
Yes.
So it's a light pink with a white, a hot pink eye, and this will bloom for 6 to 10 weeks in the springtime at least, and then maybe intermittently through the summer and fall a little bit, especially if you'll pinch it.
Ooh.
It's an evergreen, low grower.
Oh, I didn't realize that you could get phlox to rebloom like that.
You can. If you pinch it a little bit and you fertilize and
Yeah.
tend it a little bit, you can.
Oh,
And then the next
interesting.
one here, these are tulips, and these are ready to bloom. They'll bloom in a few weeks. And then I also
Wow.
showed you earlier that one daffodil that's the dwarf daffodil with the tiny, tiny flower just starting to come out of bloom. And it
Oh,
is
wow.
spectacular. This one's called tete-a-tete.
That's so
It only
darling.
grows about 8 inches tall. The flower's 1.25 inches across, and it looks just like a miniature daffodil.
It really does. It looks like a teeny tiny little baby
So
daffodil.
we knew that you would need these for springtime. You maybe didn't get them planted the fall, or you want them for a container garden, and you can come and get these, and they're just starting to bud up and grow.
Oh, that's a great
They're
tip.
be
So you
blooming.
have actually, because if your bulbs don't come up the way you expected, and you still want to take advantage of getting some spring bulbs, you can just buy them from you.
Yeah, you can come get them
Oh,
now.
wow. That's
and
awesome.
we have a few hundred containers of these, and then you'll have them to be able to bloom for about Easter time. It's right in line with that. And Easter's only about, 5 weeks away?
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I love it. Okay, so when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more plants with LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in studio is LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens. We have been discussing all these beautiful plants that LaRene has brought in, and she was just mentioning to me that the columbine, and we'll have a picture of this up on our Instagram at Gardening Utah, but the columbine is a native plant, and we
It
talked
grows in the foothills and up in the meadows and the mountains,
That's amazing, yes.
along with cranesbills and penstemons and many other plants. In fact, I had a penstemon here. I don't know where it went. It has a little pink flower on
Oh,
it.
yes, okay.
I'm not
And
sure where that one went. We'll find it and put a picture out.
and one of the benefits of native plants is they're water-wise, correct?
They are, and they use water wisely. And let's talk about using water wisely.
Absolutely.
We all overwater most
we?
of the time. There are a few times when maybe that root ball, you've planted something new and the root ball gets dry and the plant wilts. That plant is talking to you saying, "Hey, water me. I need your attention, please." And so if something is wilted, you need to make sure that it gets rehydrated, especially if it's like a hanging basket and you're pouring the water on it and it's running through, you're thinking, "Oh, it's getting water." It may not be getting adequate water to the center of that root ball. And if it continues to wilt, it means that it still doesn't have enough water clear to the middle of that root ball. And that took me over 20 years to learn at the garden center. I've killed more plants than anybody I know. So I'm quite an authority about it. And I'm passionate about teaching people how to water.
Yes.
So you're wanting to water specifically right where that root ball is, right where that plant is. And so I believe a lot of watering needs to be done with drip irrigation and maybe small spray heads. I also believe that there are some excellent resources here in the area to teach us how to more wisely water. And
Yes.
one of the best is the Jordan Valley Conservation Gardens out there. They have demonstration gardens and plant examples and plant lists and even brochures with examples of gardens and how to water them. You go up to Park City, Summit County has excellent resources on watering and native plants and how to more wisely plant your landscape, including Firewise. That's another subject.
Absolutely.
Firewise is excellent. I believe if we water wisely and use top dressings, mulches to reduce the temperature of the soil as well as the evaporation, we can have beautiful, lush gardens and continue to reduce our water, because there's going to be a day when the population and the water is going to be compromised and the abundance isn't going to be there still.
Absolutely. And in a future episode of Gardening Utah, we'll talk all about watering lawns and how to do that a lot more efficiently without wasting the water. You're hitting a hot button for me because being water-wise is such a passion of mine as well. And, as you drive around in Utah and you see these, the golf courses and the churches and the businesses just spraying, sprinklers just on a timer, just on an automatic every day, and it just, I wish there was like a water police that you could call.
What there is actually there's a lot of smart water systems that have when they know the weather patterns, and they can automatically, or on your phone, you can actually control your water system, and you can reduce the times and the different valves, the different stations, and you can also put reducers on stations and water. Some areas drip and some areas not drip, like your container gardens. You can put drip right off of your sprinkler heads.
Yes.
To subsidize your watering, so that even if you go out of town, you're not worried about things drying out.
Yes.
And dying, and all your hard work and your love of your plants is compromised there. There's so many beautiful tools out there to help us.
There really is, more than ever, and I think it's so important to take advantage of those because you think a lot of people just put their sprinklers on and just a routine
and forget about them for the rest of the season.
Yes, and your lawn and your plants need different amounts of water at all different times of the year.
Sure, and I also think that plants are our friends. These are my toys. I am sharing with you my favorites, my toys here today, and in sharing with you, there's also an extreme level of health with plants cleaning the air, indoor plants cleaning the air. The NASA studies, you go to NASA, you look at indoor plants, they will tell you the best ones. And one of them is that mother-in-law's tongue, that Sansevieria, that's that
yes.
long.
It kind of like, isn't it also called snake plant?
Yes, the snake plant. And it is wonderful. Easy care.
Yes.
Easy for kids too. Wonderful in an office or in your home. And so plants also create happiness, and there's also programs out there in the clinical industry of mental health where people they're told to go out in nature 2 hours a week.
Yes.
Or they're told to go garden every day for 30 minutes and to go smell plants and to get these senses going in them, as well as the movement of healthy food and knowing where our table food comes from. And I mean, even knowing what has been put on those, and that if we're growing our own food, we know. And there are very safe composts and healthy ways to grow plants that require very little pest control, because you keep a garden clean and a plant healthy, and it's not going to have pests.
That's right. That's right.
And also you can rinse off aphids, you can put ladybugs out, you can put praying mantis sacs out. Those kinds of things. You can do different potions with different composts and have the different plant teas to help with those kinds of things. And it's all over on the internet. There's local places that do it. It's wonderful. There's so many things that we can do to make our lives more healthy, and plants definitely create happiness.
I could not agree more. I think that's one of the reasons that I'm so attracted to gardening and have been for so long, is getting outside and being in nature just completely changes your day.
We have many guests that come into Millcreek Gardens and just say, I'm just here to just look around today, or I just need a peaceful moment, or I'm on my lunch break, or I don't even know why I'm here today. I just drove in. My wheels on my car just turned in here. And, and it's so fun to share some of our favorite things, because there's things like the Dianthus family, the Sweet Williams. They're very fragrant. Things like that fall blooming clematis, the Montana fall clematis. It has an inch across white flower, and it just blooms like no tomorrow in the fall. And it's extremely fragrant and very easy to grow and super hardy.
Wow.
Montana has the name Montana in the name. It comes from a very hardy rootstock. So.
I don't think I realized that you could get a clematis to bloom in the fall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a fabulous clematis. White, totally awesome, abundant flowers, like hundreds of little inch across flowers that are super fragrant. And there's also times when you'll see a plant like, why is this growing in the sun? Or why is this growing in the shade? Or this isn't even a hardy plant. How's it growing here? It's amazing what I see out there in nature. If a plant wants to grow and be your friend, and we talk to plants, we're happy with plants. I believe that in sharing with plants and people and connecting them, there is just a vibrancy about that creates beauty and enhancing our outdoor living spaces and even our indoor living spaces, and it's just beautiful.
Isn't that amazing? I just love it. Well, we'll be right back with LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens. I'm your host, Jana Francis. We will be right back.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time.
Savvy moms everywhere are shopping at Steals.com, a trusted daily deal shopping website for moms, babies, and kids. At Steals.com, quantities are limited, so act fast. Steals.com has an amazing selection, all at prices up to 70% off. Your shopping destination is just a click away at Steals.com, but don't delay. The daily steal changes every day at 9 a.m. You'll find everything for kids, for women, and the home. Everything you'd need to throw a great birthday party, gifts for friends, women's shoes, furniture for the home, and more. Shop Steals.com and start saving today. Steals.com.
Growing everything from apples to zucchini. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in studio is LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens.
Where every day's a great day.
I love it. It absolutely is, and we are having such a fun conversation on the break about certain plants that, we mentioned earlier that just take you right back to a certain spot. And we were discussing our grandmother's gardens.
Yes, and I learned so much from my grandmother, and I didn't even realize it till a couple of years ago. I'm headed to a family reunion on my mother's side, my mother's mother, and she was an excellent gardener. She was a farmer from Idaho, and in her aging years, she actually moved to Salt Lake City to be near her family, and she had a beautiful garden. And I realized that I wanted to take some plants and some lilies. I had some bulbs, so I wanted to take the lilies, and I thought, what else can I take with me? And so I have a greenhouse behind my home. I grow perennials and other things. I have plant tests going, and I'm really a plant nerd, so I do all these weird things. But I decided I would take these plants, and I kept taking more and more, and I took like cranesbill wild geranium and iris and red hot pokers and many others. And I just filled my car. I took as many as my car would hold. Well, we get to the family reunion. You know how there's always a family meeting?
Yes.
And so after the family meeting, I'm saying, okay, everybody, like, what are these plants? And I said, well, I'll tell you later. So after the family meeting, I said, I just gathered some plants that were from Grandma's garden. And as I did that, I realized how much influence my grandmother had to me on plants. And every decoration day, every Memorial weekend, my grandma would go out to the garden. She'd pick the iris and the peonies and the snowball bushes and the greenery, like even lilacs if they were still in bloom, and we would take them to the cemetery and honor our family. And then in the summer, she would grow things, and she had perennial hibiscus, and she had roses, and under her roses she had strawberries, and we'd be out there and pick the strawberries and try not to get invaded and pricked by the thorny bushes, and we'd eat the strawberries on our cereal in the morning and that kind of stuff. And so as I did that, I became very emotional about my grandmother and how beautiful her life was to me, because she had these beautiful plants, and I happened to be one that lived just a few blocks away, and so I spent extra time with her. So I get to this reunion, I share these plants with my family, and my aunt right off said, we have a garden already with a few of her plants, like iris from her garden. She had since passed away. She'd been gone for probably 15 years, and they're all gathering these plants. Well, so last summer, out of the blue, my one cousin texts me, and she says, I'm out in Grandma's garden. Thank you for these plants. And since then, several cousins and family members have just said, this was really awesome to just be able to think of Grandma and honor her because of what she knew. And I know you have a special story.
Well, and I'm getting emotional as well, because my story is almost identical to yours as far as just, the different flowers that she had growing at that time of year. And absolutely, we would, cut the flowers and go to the Murray Cemetery and, leave them for the family members. And My grandma had a really rare collection of iris. She was a
Mine
really
too.
a iris catalog,
Yes.
a cataloger, and always had to have the iris of the year. And she actually started I have an actual obsession with iris. I mean, I've got at least 60 different varieties in my yard. I have
That is
thousands
amazing.
and thousands of iris. I'm not kidding. And so my grandma really started that kind of obsession for me. And we'd take the different varieties out to the graves. And, I've saved a lot of her iris, from her Murray garden into my Murray garden. And it's just, and so I take her, because she's and Murray. And so, because she's since passed. And so I'll take her blooming, it's a specific variety that she loved called Breakers. And I take her a
cool.
Breakers every Memorial Day.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So a really interesting thing happened last fall. This lady came into Millcreek Gardens and she says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, you're my grandma's neighbor." And she had since moved to Tooele. Well, when she moved, my grandma was still alive and she took iris from my grandmother's garden to her garden in Tooele. And she brought me like 6 boxes of grandma's iris. And I'm like, this is amazing. So at Millcreek Gardens this spring, we're going to have a collection of iris called Grandmother's Iris.
You're kidding.
And some of them, I hope we know the colors. We hope we kept it straight.
Yes.
But we're going to sell my grandmother's iris at the garden center. And my grandma has been gone for, I think, about 22 years. And I actually spoke at her funeral. We were really close.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize that impact. And so even today, I'm like realizing, oh my goodness, there's so much more to it. And so many people come into the gardens and they go, "I used to do this with my uncle. I used to do this with my grandma. This reminds me of my grandpa."
Yes.
There'll be an old implement there, an old tool, and they'll go, "Oh, God, my grandpa had one of these. I've got to have one." And it's not about even the function of the tool. It's like, I want to hug this and feel it. Now, I've got to tell you this really cool story.
Yes.
A few weeks ago, one of my employees said to me, "One of my friends' mother's house was landscaped by your father in about 1957. And they have a design. They have an actual layout of the plants. And this last weekend, he brought it to Millcreek Gardens and left it on my desk."
You're kidding.
So Monday, I get back from a trip, which we went to the Northwest Flower and Garden Show in Seattle, which is a marvelous show.
Oh,
We
wow.
should all go to that show. And we saw all sorts of cool things. But anyway, I opened this and I just feel like I'm opening up my father as I look at this, and I recognize the writing, I recognize the symbols on the layout, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to frame it. Now, about 10 years ago, I did a job for one of our guests, and they came in and they said, "Your dad did our landscaping in 1956, and we need to redo it now." And it's up east, like near the Dan store, east of the boulevard, like 40th South and like 30th East or so. And they had the original plan and his typed out bid and his typed out landscape plan, and to plant list. And so I have that, and I'm really excited about that. So now I have another piece to go with it. And it's just
amazing.
This piece of history. My mother also, I cannot go without saying, my mother taught me a ton about being frugal, being plant savvy, how to sell plants to people, how to talk to people about them. And when I was a little girl, I would go out there and work. And I worked at 5 cents an hour when I was 5 years old with an ice cream bucket.
Oh, wow.
And a couple of years later, I got the biggest raise of my life. I got it raised from 5 cents to 10 cents an hour.
Oh, wow.
With an ice cream bucket weeding, and I would be transplanting. I've planted thousands of roses, probably tens of thousands of roses, into containers to sell them at the garden center. And I was like the little rose girl that would go out and we used to daub the black tar on them to keep the cane borer out. Now there's other ways to keep the cane borer out, but I used to do all that. And so I know a lot, and I can't even remember everything I know, but it is so fun to garden and to share our knowledge with others. So
Isn't it?
Millcreek Gardens is a super special place. And as people drive in, many people have come to me over the years and said, "I drive in here and there's a special feeling."
Oh,
Well, I can also tell you
I
it goes back
believe
to
it.
pioneer days, because John Scott in 1948 came out to that area and saw springs on the land, which actually became eventually west of us. There were fish hatchery
yes.
troughs that did fish, and there was these big flowing wells, 3-inch flowing wells. There was about 8 of them on that property. It's now a park, and there's a community garden there, which is also another awesome thing to do, have a community garden. And he came out there, and as they traveled across the plains, they had in their wagons, they had beehives, they had fruit trees, and they had seeds and some perennial plants that they had, like they'd put them in wet cloths and bring them and carry them across the plains. So there's a lot of history of gardening in Utah, gardening in Salt Lake area. There's families that go way back. The Israel Barlow family I'm related to, he was a nurseryman.
Wow.
And he came here across the plains.
Wow. I love this story. Now, the fish hatchery is not there anymore, correct?
That's correct. But there is actually, the spring is there, and it runs into Millcreek, and it's hidden. People wouldn't know what to look for, but the water still flows in. I'm sad that they didn't cap those and actually put them into the water system. I hope someday they'll have to do that. I don't know why they wouldn't have, but anyway, it's sad that it isn't there anymore, but there's a beautiful park there.
Wow. I love this story. And, you're exactly right about Millcreek Gardens definitely does have just such a special feeling when you go there. And there's so much to look at because you've got so many, like, an amazing selection of seeds. I mean, an incredible indoor, store that's got gifts and beautiful indoor plants and
tons of pottery to go with those indoor plants and to enhance your indoor decor as well as outdoor. And you talk about seeds and bulbs.
Oh,
we are really good at that.
Yes.
We're really good at organics and enhancing the soil structure and doing things safely.
Yes.
We have a fabulous rose selection. We talked earlier about perennials, which is one of my favorites and one of my specialties, but also our premium annuals and our flowering and color plants for outside. We also have a fabulous selection of dwarf conifers and dwarf shrubs. If you don't want to have to do a lot of pruning and you want different textures and colors and foliage, and then putting those together so there's seasonal color changes and different textures and colors and foliage, and shade tree selection, fruit tree selection, small fruits, all that, as well as edibles and herbs. You cannot beat our selection.
Well, and the trees as well. I mean, I am always blown away at the just unique and beautiful trees that you have. I actually bought a weeping blue Atlas cedar from you, I believe probably 2 years ago.
And very much a focal point plant.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's right at the entrance of my home.
Well, what's also cool, see, that would be a weeping focal point. It can also be a narrow columnar one. It can also be a spreading type. And there's lots of different plants that you just wouldn't know how to put it together. So come and we'll help you with that.
Yes.
We also have like shade trees that are more columnar or more dwarf, or even something like the ginkgo tree. It has historical
the ginkgo's beautiful
features about it, like one of the oldest known plants because of the fossils that they find, and the bristlecone pine and selaginella, which is a little moss plant that we have inside our garden center. So you take something like ginkgo biloba, and that is a memory enhancer plant.
Yes.
So I like to go over and just stand by them, and hopefully I'll have a better memory.
Absolutely.
It's a fun joke to think about.
I love it.
I can't remember everything I know.
Oh, well, LaRene, this has been so much fun. I can't wait to have you back on the show. I could talk to you all day about plants, and I think that...
we have some wonderful things that you can be planting right now at Millcreek Gardens. There's creeping phlox, Arabis abricia, early blooming. Remember the ranunculus I showed you earlier?
Yes.
And the anemones, they're ready to plant, as well as primroses and pansies and perennials. So now's a great time to get your planning going in the garden.
Absolutely. And you can check out all the plants that LaRene's brought on our Instagram at Gardening Utah. And so that's it for today's episode. And as always, let us know what you'd like to see on our show. You can message us right there on Instagram at Gardening Utah. Thank you so much, LaRene Bautner of Millcreek Gardens, where every day is a great day.
Yeah, every day is a great day at Millcreek Gardens.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Join us next week when we talk about when and how to prune roses, and we go over a garden checklist with horticulturist Biuna Tomolino. Thanks for listening, and we hope you get out there and grow.
Have a great day.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah. Available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.